Hi, Steve. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to going through our review almost, our thoughts about learning for performance and why the time to think about learning for performance is now. And I know we've got loads of questions to go through to sort of explore this topic. And maybe the sort of first one to kick off with, if that's okay, is what do we mean by learning for performance, and why is it important? And why is it different from maybe from what people are naturally doing? And I know this is your bread and butter, so
Sure.
if you kick off, then I'll try and add my little bits too. But
Well, yeah, try and
over
shut
to
me up.
you.
You got me on a hot topic, and a passionate topic. So I think this is not a new idea, right? It's been an idea that's been out for a long time, and there's been companies doing this in different ways and interesting ways, but maybe not in an industrialized way, not in an easy way.
Mhm.
So the concept here obviously is how we move our learning design from, I guess, what we call designing from the left, which is we've got a
Yeah,
problem, the answer's a course, and we're going to build
yeah,
some courses against it, and then we're going to maybe measure that at the end and try and find some way to prove it had value, versus what we call designing from the right, which
yeah,
is we're designing with the outcome in mind first. So we're
yeah,
working out, is it a customer satisfaction score we're trying to increase? Is it an engineering right first time? Is it a
yeah,
sales number? What's the outcome we're trying to do? And then we're designing backwards from that. Most of the times, and this obviously follows best practice from people like Charles Jennings that's talked about
yeah, sure.
value-based learning design, and
Yeah,
Bob Mosher with his 5 moments.
yeah,
But generally, every thought leader, when they're designed from the right, always start with we're going to create a whole bunch of knowledge, right? What do we not teach is the
yeah,
first question, rather than what do we train? And,
yeah,
and generally speaking, that comes across as between 70 and 90% of what we traditionally would put in a course. We're deciding to build in a way that people can find at moment of need.
yeah,
What I think why now it's really interesting is that the idea has been out there for a while, but it's been quite hard, I think, to get the content in a format that's really searchable at point of need.
yeah,
And I think why now is because the technologies that have now come to market with us, and I think the things that are powering us,
yeah,
that allows us now to not have to have such a convoluted way to
yeah,
get the content into a format that people can search and find.
yeah,
And that's what I think, it's the industrialization of the concept, that meaning we can use some pretty standard file formats. We can upload a video or a document or whatever format it is, and the technology, the AI, does
yeah,
the hard work to allow the person to have a Google-like experience or a
yeah,
predictive experience automatically
yeah,
without having to code stuff to create that. I'm stuck. Help me do this thing right now,
yeah.
or help me find the best person's brain in the company who digitized this at some point, and I'm now learning. As like, I mean, and I'll shut up in a sec.
That's all
But
right. Keep going.
this goes back to my mum's teaching for me in a kitchen when I was 7, 8 years old, which was,
Mm.
if you want to learn something, learn from the best.
Yeah, yeah,
That was the thing, right? And what we've seen over the years is our clients used our type of technology and thinking philosophy to bottle greatness. A little bit like our Fuse School concept, right? That we have 1,000 bite-sized videos on YouTube across all the science subjects. But there's one thing is, you want to get the knowledge out of people's heads, and I think we've learned how to do that really well through
yeah,
social learning and new production techniques.
yeah,
The really exciting bit now is using technology to allow that bottle greatness, that individual, to get to
yeah,
that person, because I know what you're doing right now, and the
yeah.
whole thing using technology in a really much more advanced way.
Yeah. I like that thing. So I was just thinking in the past, back in the day, I know we've known each other a long time. I was catching, just sort of reflecting. It's been, yeah, probably about the early 2000s when we first met. I was at NTO and you were doing your fuel thing, I think, back in the day.
Yeah,
And even back then, we used to talk about a core approach with the teams, and that was around context, the who, the what, the where, the when. So what's the environment, the audience almost, and then the outcome. So it's like your CO outcome, that's the why. And then the route was actually, back in that time, we'd think, oh, there's a course that we needed to be the route, that's how people are going to get to effectively the outcome. And that the E in core was about evidence. So what measures the success are we focusing on? And that was usually the difficult part of trying to pin down a stakeholder to say, how will you know? How will you know that we made a difference? And it strikes me that that sort of fits well into what you were talking about. That sort of focus on the outcomes, understand the context, and the route is diversified so much. And even back in the day, we'd have said sort of we thought course first.
hmm.
Uh, what is it now that sort of I suppose in terms of the specific tech, and maybe maybe the next question then
Yeah.
is what's changed in the tech that's made it more possible now? Are there specific things? Because Gloria Gray wrote her stuff about performance support 40
Yeah,
years ago.
I think it's a great question, right? So I think again, I think there were to get this performance support world. It was relatively limited, right? Performance support was mainly around task-based learning, right? Which again, still really good, but limited in that type way. And the problem was the cost and the time to get the content into a special format. And it is still in most performance support tools. I think the difference between now and 10 years ago, right, is Google and others have created new technologies. Yeah. So even Google has only introduced its concept of questions and answers in the last 3-4 years. So and interesting now that even in the last year has been advertising on TV to say, by the way, the way that Google works now, Google doesn't only find you the website or the file or the document that has the answer, we're going to extract out the answer. So if you ask who is Gandhi, Google doesn't know the answer towards that, but it knows, like my mum, it knows someone who does. So it knows that inside Wikipedia, there's a sentence or a paragraph in Wikipedia to bring back that answer. And it's the crawling and all the AI that's doing that. So I think the difference is that technology didn't exist when you or I were talking 20 years ago. Yeah. So it was, our instrument was the course. Therefore, that's all we had. And even though we knew it was limited, we just did the best with a pretty blunt instrument that we had. Now we've got Google technologies to actually integrate Interviews and other platforms, but we're the first to integrate that Google AI, Microsoft's AI. So we did the same as Google, but for tacit knowledge of an organization and the stuff they buy. So the same concept where crawling all of this learning and all this knowledge that's out there, indexing it in a certain way to allow people to have, and without having to make it in a special format. Google doesn't ask you to re-index its websites. It crawls it and gets it. So that's that concept that then says, now that you can find answers much easier and by the AI allowing that to happen, what do we not teach now? And a lot of the time, it's like the analogy I often give is, it's kind of like your, it's like not in 90% difference. And it's like your black taxi driver versus your Uber driver. So, for those not familiar in London, to own one of those famous black taxis, you have to memorize every street route across London. And it's the same technique they've been teaching since the Victorian mechanism, which is like rote. And it takes 4 years to learn the whole street parts, the street addresses, before you start making money. Compare that to an Uber driver. An Uber driver gets its license the same way the black taxi driver does. And then in 10 days, they're making money because of the Googleization of every street part. And they do that on any street in the world, any city in the world. And Uber is a multi-billion-dollar company because the technology has done that, whilst the black taxi company is still just doing London. So I think that's a great metaphor for what do we no longer need to teach and need to memorize, because we can make it instantly available within seconds.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think besides the almost that sort of background tech, there's also the touch points, I think, have changed.
Yeah.
And I think about the devices. Obviously, everybody's got their phone probably within hand's reach now. Is that making a big influence as well, do you think, in terms of people's approach to performance support? And is it about the device? Is it about the media as well? Because again, back in the day when we were talking originally, we'd have been, here's a nice, we'll have a few graphics and a bit of text, a few graphics and a bit of text. Probably wouldn't even had an animated GIF or anything like that. And the animation would have been in Flash and ... So the type of interactions, the type of learning that's also being offered up, is that you're seeing shifts in that as well?
Yeah, and I think to the point, right? So I think, as you said, context is critical, right? Is absolutely king and queen in this type of place. So, Google doesn't really care where you're accessing on a mobile or desktop, right? What it's doing behind the scenes is making this really smart index, and then it's trying to understand, how do I get that knowledge in the way you get to through different interfaces. Those interface in our world, sometimes that's a customer of ours is using a QR code to point at a robot. Or literally some of our clients doing that now. They're people learning how to use robots, but in the flow of work by pointing their cameras at the robot, at the QR code, and it's explaining the instructions, what they need to do there and then with that robot. In the desktop piece, it's moving. It's the pop-up browser extension. For us, we call that FuseFlow, which is, I could be in Salesforce or SAP, any bespoke system, and I press that button, and it intelligently understands what I can and can't see, what knowledge I'm allowed to see and I'm not, who I am, what my preferred language is, what I'm currently working on, what task I'm currently working on, because it scans the page smartly, and then it says, let me go and now find the best bit of content in this recommended brain of a million learning objects and bring back the 2 minute or the 1 minute or the line that I need to go do that. That's what the technology is now doing. And in both occurrences, I'm not going to a standard web page, which I'm browsing the way through. I'm using the intelligence to bring to me and understand my context and bring to me what I need.
And it's interesting, is it? So would you say that was personalization, or is it contextualization, or are they both the same thing? I just going to try to split some hairs.
Yeah.
I was curious about that.
No, but it's really good. I think the context increases the personalization.
Exactly.
So a lot of it is about, personalization in a recommendation of, like, a Flipboard or a Facebook. When you've got that personalized feed, that's one level of personalization. Personalization is also search as well. So if I'm searching for something, it's personalized because of the world that's relevant to me. So it's not going to bring me results that's irrelevant to me. But then context on top of that is our learning platforms know more than Google do about the individual, because they know what you're working on, they know all that HR data. So when I'm pointing at that robot, it's saying, I understand the context of where you are, what you're doing, and so forth. Likewise, a desktop app, understand what screen you're on. You're in the opportunities page on Salesforce. So that context then offers a more personalized recommendation in context to what you're currently doing at that moment.
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because it almost takes you into a whole sphere of intelligent learning, when the intelligence is being offered up to you, both in terms of the content, but also understanding you and your context. So,
well, and I think again, it's still 100% that, but I think it's still about it's bringing the creativity of the human brain and the creativity of people together with amazing AI and technology. So ideally, you still want to go and digitize that best practice. So you still want, for example, in a perfect world, social learning activities where people are naturally codifying their best. I walked out the building and the sales guys just won the biggest deal, and they've digitized how they've done it, where they went wrong, and lessons learned. But at some point in a year's time, someone's pressing the button and it said, that's the thing you need, right? The bottle greatness in context to what you're doing right now. That's the magic of what I think we're trying to approach.
So it's really a convergence of lots of different factors. When we think about the reason of time is now, it's like thinking back to Gloria Gray and writing a great book around performance support. It's like, so the devices make it possible, the way that we can author with video so rapidly and capture stuff so easily, the sort of workflow thinking that we're already embracing as L&D professionals, maybe a focus on more micro learning. So how can I chunk this up to be suitable rather than here's a 4-hour course, start now. And then the stuff around actually the ubiquity of Wi-Fi and network means that you're almost untethered around what you do.
I 100% agree. And I think, just summarizing some of those points, rapid piece is key, right?
Yeah.
The fact that I don't want to have to use Articulate or a special authoring tool for performance support software. I just want to be able to pick up a phone, record something, or press a button, write an article, and don't have to worry about the nuances of the learning industry. Anyone should be able to create content in a meaningful way, like YouTube, right?
And I was just going to say that because it's almost like a new norm, isn't it? People know that there's that sort of content that works, because if something breaks at home, that may be one of the first places I go to work out how the hell do I do that. Watch a few videos. Plumbing. I don't know anything about plumbing, but I can fix a few things now.
And I think the example is like, so we obviously have our charity channel, which has 1,000 videos for the kids' education system. Has just passed 100 million views last week, which is amazing.
Wow.
The number one source point for that isn't YouTube, it's Google. So the majority of the people finding the video on the YouTube channel, right, is people going to YouTube, going to Google and saying, how do I do this? What's the answer towards that? And then it's signposting off to saying, well, actually, Few School's YouTube channel and that video inside it, this particular video of the 2 billion videos on YouTube is the best answer to that particular problem versus the Wikipedia text-based answer, right? Google's doing the hard work, but we're creating the content in the right type of platforms, and the system is now interconnected with a front door that knows everything.
So maybe that's a good segue to the next question, right? So what work scenarios and audience does this work best for? Are there particular sorts of environment, and are there ones that you'd say, it works for everybody, but these are the ones we get some sort of super results?
I think in any industry where knowledge is changing rapidly, right, and as faster it changes, the bigger the problem we've got. And as our customers, talk about the need for real-time learning because it's going to change. So you look at certain industries that are going through huge transformation, like the car industry. It used to be that you build a car, same car this year as 5 years' time, relatively easy to educate a global audience of sales and service stuff. Now, every new car is being updated by software that's updating every 2 weeks. So, the ocean doesn't fit the bucket anymore, right? You've got, it's if the speed of change to educate hundreds of thousands of people with a traditional course model that takes 3 months to build and then 3 weeks to translate, it doesn't work anymore towards it. So I think wherever there is rapid change in a role or industry, where digital disruption is really changing it, right? Then I think those are the ones that are really embracing and running fast and saying we need something different that's more in tune to this real-time learning need.
And I think it's probably really hard to even think of an industry where things aren't changing rapidly, right? So it's like that might be worth a competition, right? Just to say, so what industry isn't moving to agile? I saw some great articles from the guys at McKinsey, and they were talking about the impact of adopting agile business, and they were talking about 20 to 30% increases in profitability, customer satisfaction, employee engagement from adapting almost an agile mentality across everything that they do. Because it changes everything around how you manage, how you work together, the cadence of change, the way you listen to customers.
And I think you're right. I think it's harder to find, I think, an industry that isn't having this challenge than it is to find ones that are. I mean, because I was like, well, farming, there you go. Farming's the one that's not impacted by it. And then, and I don't know about every country, but in the UK, you're saying, well, actually, now they're going through digital transformation with new equipment to be more carbon neutral, right? So actually, not the target. So, okay, so not farming now. So what else we got? Exactly. You're right. I think it's genuinely hard to find industries that aren't having to change this new learning model.
Yeah, and I think maybe to follow on from that, and I was thinking about some of the high consequence industries. So where does the boundary get cut between the point when you have to say, well, actually, you might need more than just performance support to either be legal to do that particular thing, or actually you just need to be able to do some of these things in emergency. So if you're a surgeon, if you're a pilot, if you work in a foundry, if you're in medicines and pharma, then there's really strong regulation around were they qualified to be on that production line. Are there particular parts? Is it about that sort of 5 moments of need? What's the...
Yeah, no, I think so. I think so. I mean, again, I think this is not to say that learn the flow is the only answer, right? It's the totality of learning. It may come to 90%, right? I think of actually where we're improving. And again, what the data tells us is those organizations that have moved from 100% upfront training to maybe 10-20% upfront training, but 80% I'm continuously learning by suggestions, searching, discovering stuff, but in a format towards it, are performing normally at 300% better.
Wow.
I mean, it's crazy the numbers that we come out. But to your point, the black taxi driver and the Uber driver still need to get a driving license, right? So you still need that foundational training to not kill us on the road when we're walking down it, right? And likewise, I think for every industry, your health and safety and the basic stuff, right? So there is training's good for the foundational stuff, right? It's not necessarily, we know from the results, it's not. There's just too much that a lot of our clients, when they come to us, they're saying we have this brain stuffing approach to learning. Training is brain stuffing, and we want to move away from that to real-time continuous learning.
But it's interesting, isn't it? So when thinking about sort of Bob Mosher's 5 moments, you got apply. Do you need support when you're applying learning? Even pilots go through a checklist before they take off.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. If you're trying to solve new...
your point, and it's also the refreshing piece, right? So this concept isn't just about, it's about, I learned something, but it was a long time ago, and I need to refresh myself. There is new stuff that has come out. I want to get to that, and I want my learning systems to both help me find that when I'm stuck, or suggest to me, here, you need to update yourself, right? Because new stuff's coming through, but recognizing most of us never really sat down at a 1-hour learning course and focused always.
It's true. I always like the phrase, there was a guy called Marshall Goldsmith, and he talked about leadership being a contact sport. And that was all about, it's not until you actually do it, and then you start to solicit feedback, that you know whether you're getting better at it. And you've got some great stories. So just to sort of segue on to another question then, what impact has learning for performance had on how leading organisations deliver onboarding and reboarding. And obviously that's a hot topic because there are certain industries that are going through a sort of like a tsunami of hiring
Yeah, yeah,
as a
yeah.
result of the Great Resignation and,
Yeah, yeah,
all the
yeah.
restructuring of industry. So are there ones that you pick out and say these are good
Yeah.
exemplars?
Well, yeah, and I think to be fair, look, the onboarding is the favorite area to look at, right? Because
Yeah.
it's one where you can prove the biggest impact
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
by
yeah,
doing
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah,
Because the biggest learning curve, right, is
yeah.
you may, and this is, I think, you may be an expert in sales or service, but you're not an expert in that organization's way they do
Yes.
it. So
Yeah, yeah. And then there's also the products and solution sets
yeah,
and yeah.
yeah. So again, I've seen some radical things over the years. Everyone that's measured it, onboarding is where you see the biggest seismic difference, right? I mean, again, when we've seen this type of approach in life, you tend to get a double-digit difference in performance.
Yeah.
In onboarding, it's a triple-digit difference, which is
Wow.
insane when you look at learning and training. So, a couple of key stats there. I mean, alongside one of the ones which we just redid a year ago to see whether the data still held up. We looked at what customer satisfaction was in Vodafone. It was again same company,
Yeah.
same outsourcing company they had, but it was one outsourcing company had one office, one location that was engaged, highly engaged
Yeah.
versus not highly engaged. So one is learning the flow regularly every day, and one's not really doing it. And that was in life, and that was like a 13-14% difference in the kind of key KPIs. During onboarding, though, the big difference was and again they ran the technology, same company,
Mm-hmm.
and literally west of England versus east of England during the same
Nice.
time period for 1 year.
Yeah.
We're really great in A/B tests to do it.
Yeah.
And what came out was the people that were being brain stuffed, traditional formal learning,
Yeah.
averaged a 12-point NPS score as after 6 weeks. That's
Yeah.
the average score after 1 year of people going through that 1 year of data. The
Yeah.
people that were reduced by 70-80%, but were giving the knowledge at point of need,
Okay.
and were given the habit, right? And the way they were given
Yeah,
the habit,
yeah, yeah.
the way they were given the habit was every time a new person went to their manager, line manager, said, "How do I do this?" They said it's on Fuse. Second time they asked a question, it's on Fuse. By the third or fourth time, they start to become, all right, I need to I need to find it myself.
Yeah, yeah.
But then the difference, again, the average comparison was after 6 weeks, the average was an 84-point NPS score. Right, so
Wow.
12 points, 84 points.
Wow.
Again, it's a
That's huge.
triple digit. Recently,
Yeah.
again, I think Avon last year, they looked at the same thing, and they looked at the data of what happens to people that just consume big courses on a frequent or infrequent basis. And it was like a 3 to 4% difference, single digit difference in performance of those being people trained versus not. Still good, but not like whammy. The people that had the habit of frequently going back to the platform, and search and perform support was the main way of doing it. I've forgotten how to do that. Can I ask a question of that? Those people were performing 300% better
Wow.
than they were. So 3 or 4% difference versus that's 100 times difference between when someone is being on board into organization and the first 90 days of performance. And we see this like, and maybe the last one we saw a couple of years ago as well was, one of our clients that was trying to reduce the time to payback. So, so they, instead of time to competency or time to expertise, they said, well, actually, we know how long it takes to pay back in terms of a salesperson, in terms of their van, their equipment, their engineering, and so forth towards it. And that would take 18 months for full payback. When they moved to this new, let's reduce the brain stuffing, that went down to 6 months, and then eventually down to 3 months, which is, so it seems to me, this is insane, what the data tells us when companies get it right.
But also, I was just thinking that the whole premise when we started off the conversation was learning for performance. Even taking that as being your identity, part of your DNA as a learning function, starts to put the KPIs, I guess, straight at the heart of everything you do, especially when you think about performance support. Do you see that come out in the sorts of relationships your customers have with their internal partners when they start to say, we're thinking about a performance-centered approach to learning rather than a course approach?
Well, I think two things that are interesting there. I think one is, I think, again, the most progressive clients that have fully moved into this new world. So those most progressive clients, they have a performance consulting type, relationship with their stakeholders. And if they get to a part at the beginning that says, we don't think there's a hypothesis of value towards doing a program, they would recommend not do the program. That's quite a different mindset to saying, we will always build your course versus we can't together work out if we did an interaction, we think it's going to improve. So our recommendation is not to actually work with us here. Maybe something else would improve it. I think the second thing, and obviously for our side, is who we attract. So I think one of your colleagues was saying, I think Fiona was saying the other
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
she says you always recognise a Fuse customer because they always talk performance first.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
think it's probably like we obviously attract that type of audience as well.
Yeah, yeah. But it's interesting. We're doing some digital learning realities survey for 2022 at the moment, and some of our early indications, because we've asked about people's approach to learning delivery, and just this is hot off the press, right? We're still seeing the numbers change. We're about 100 responses in from corporates, another 100 from vendors, but the corporates are saying only about 10% of them feel they're advanced around performance support. There's probably just under 50% if you take the advanced and intermediate. So it's almost half of L&D are at a basic or aren't doing performance support. And you just think, wow, that's huge. That's
Well,
huge in its own right.
and I think back to that early conversation, right? Which
Yeah,
is, I think the technology has been a bit too hard, right? I
yeah,
think the idea has been great, and the people that have persevered and have made quite a big change towards it, I think I see the benefits. But it's not. I understand why we don't see more, and I think the path is too hard, and I think that's why it's so important that the technology makes that jump easier, and that's why this whole AI and Googleization piece is
yeah.
so key. That you don't have to make content in this special format, you don't have to map and program every location to a place, right? The technology does the hard work.
So maybe the next question then, just to sort of help wrap things up, because we're getting close to a half hour. I think that's what we sort of had in mind. Is what can organisations do to help make that leap to become a leader around performance support and being a learning for performance team? Are there things that you can think of that you'd say these are some good triggers or these are good approaches? This is how you can start your journey and accelerate your journey as well?
Yeah, I think again a bunch of stuff there. I think
Yeah,
the first is education, right? The first
yeah,
is awareness to what are some thought the strategy, the strategic piece, and
yeah,
that's where the likes of Bob Mosher, I think Charles Jennings and the
yeah,
Tulsa team, they all come in, right? And I think I would ask everyone to dip their heads into that place first, right? Because I think you've got to get that understanding and also get your peers and the other leaders in the company to that place that this world exists and it's not just the kind of a course up approach. And obviously then moving towards that, right? Then things like your content strategy and moving more towards a micro content strategy than the SCORM, big long form strategy, right?
yeah.
Even though we're now finding the technologies, you could take a 70-page document and the technology is now able to read it and extract the answer out. I think we have to recognize that SCORM as a standard, it still has
Yeah.
limitations. Again, maybe it's appropriate for your compliance, your health and safety, the
Yeah.
stuff you're not expecting people to need
Yeah.
to go
Yeah.
back to upon what do I do right now. But I think for everything that's about personal development,
Yeah.
I would absolutely say you've got to move away from the formats that make it really hard for smart technologies to find and extract and find the bit
Yeah.
people need when they're stuck. Because if you move away from those things, what you find is there's so much value in that knowledge, but you want to put the knowledge in a format where the technology can easily index, crawl, and then
Yes.
recommend or allow the person to find at the moment of need.
Yeah. I get that. And in terms of the sorts of people who are then developing content as well, is that a big shift in terms of helping people take the leap? Do they have to also think not only about their platform and some of their conversations with senior stakeholders, but also engaging the experts? As you say, sort of bottling greatness, I know is one of your phrases in
Yeah,
the past. Is that also part of the change to help people take that leap?
yeah. Look, I think if you paint a perfect world, right,
Yeah,
you want to create better top-down content and
yeah,
better ground-up content, right? So
yeah,
in a perfect world, and again, if I look at our the client base, you've got people that have unleashed the tacit knowledge of their best people. Sometimes that's facilitated by the central team. We're going to work out who are the people that are most likely to want to be bottled, and we're
yeah,
going to help them. Or sometimes it's facilitating them, giving them tools and coaching to be able to do it themselves. So and that stuff now through the technology is really easily the ability to become indexed and part of this corporate brain concept, right? So what ideally you want to do is create this corporate brain that's accessible in both recommendations and the answer to problems that you have. So you want ground up, but also you want, the facilitated structured information, but not so structured that the technology can't get inside it, right? Because you want the ability to crawl the content and look inside it in the same way Google does. And then the third bit is obviously the ability to extend that corporate brain to outside experts.
yeah,
So again, with us, for example, we now have connectors into things like LinkedIn Learning and Udemy and
yeah,
Coursera and
yeah,
these type of things, right? But that connector for us was always about connecting it at a bite-sized level.
yeah,
Because you look at LinkedIn Learning is 8,000 courses, but actually it's 300,000 videos, right?
yeah,
And what you want is most people want to know which videos do I want of the 300,000. So my ability to have an intelligent performance support search capability to know this is the needle in a haystack. That is what you need right now to do that task in the best possible way. So, and that corporate digital brain is basically an amalgamation of, in the ideal world, your best tacit knowledge and the best organization, the best knowledge you get from the outside world.
But it sounds to some extent, if we look out to the future, that your main touch point as an individual is going to be through search. Maybe it's going to be through voice to say, "I need to know."
Yeah. Well, I think it is. I think it already is.
Yeah.
But people haven't looked at the data as much as they could. One of our clients, before they came on board, they looked at the data and their IT team and asked how many times people are using Google per day. The average was 42 times per day per person. Right, so if people knew what reality was, Google search is the number one place people are learning in most corporates today. They just haven't seen that on their data and their learning platforms. Right? So I think people have already made their choices towards that.
And it almost comes back full circle to what you were saying about the sort of content and uncoupling it from maybe traditional solutions, thinking about how easy it is to transcribe and maybe auto-transcribe and make it navigable is part of the release point to say, actually, the knowledge can come to you if you ask the right question at the right time.
Well, that's what we're used to, right? I mean, I think that's what now, look, it's now in our psyche because Google's made it in our psyche. You know, I remember when the first moment it hit in my head, right, was on a mobile phone. So your point about mobile, I was going past a pub and the taxi driver said to me, "Oh, I wonder who opens who pub that is." And I did a little thing inside it, did a search. I said, "Oh, it's Gordon Ramsay." He looked at me and goes, "How did you know that?" And he goes, "I wonder when it's opening." Because when's it open? July the 7th. Wow, you know everything. You know everything. I was like, no. And it was like, wow. I now know everything Google does as well as I do, right? Like I've got a smart brother that knows the answer to 99% of the questions in the world. I think we haven't had that technology in the corporate way, but we're just getting that now, right? And that's going to open up a whole new way to think about learning design. So, and much more about the fact that, we need that. We need to make you safe to get you on the road, right? And that training piece. But to make you brilliant, we want to bottle the greatness of the best people of the company as they learn. And then we want to allow you to have the trust to say, that's what I'm going to get. I want to be able to trust a learning platform rather than the person nearest to me. Because most of the learning and most of the place people get it wrong is because I trust the 42 times I trust Google for the work knowledge outside of work, but inside work, I'm trusting the person nearby or my friends on a Slack or a Teams channel. Problem is though, they're getting it wrong a lot. And that's back to that onboarding thing, why 12% was the onboarding for people that were being fully brain stuffed. It wasn't because they were forgetting, if they're asking the person next to them. Versus the 84% says, I'm getting the answer from the bottle best greatest.
Yeah, exactly. The latest, the greatest.
The current. Lovely, I love that. I'm still there.
You're welcome. Steve, I think we've covered so much in half an hour. For me, that's been really exciting, really interesting. I think it's to get a sense that performance support from like Gloria Gray wrote a book, I think it was about 1984. Right? I was just starting college in those days. May not look like it, but but you just think in those days, and I just think now we're just about to release that vision, and I think it's really exciting for anybody who's L&D. One of the interesting things from our current survey at the moment is that it's the number one area that people are interested in as part of their priorities for improving learning in their organisation. So the time is now.
I 100% agree, and I also think it's probably the biggest thing towards answering the whole reskilling, upskilling piece. I think there's been we have a challenge because of all the macro economic issues going around the world. So skilling is an issue, but ultimately, right, your training course is only the foundational bit. The bit that really gets you upskilled is I need to learn on my job in the moment. And ideally, that's what this technology is now doing. Bottle the greatest, best people, bring in the expertise from the outside world through some of these libraries, and let the technology and match those two things together, right? That's the bit I think that's going to unleash our industry to provide, back to the first bit, those performance KPIs we can prove and show, and the value of what we deliver as an industry.
I think we're in for a very exciting next couple of years.
I think so. Well, thank you so much for
Pleasure.
My passionate subject.
Yeah, no, I love it. But I think everybody else should be really passionate about it. And from the research we're doing at the moment, it seems as though it's a rocket topic, for want of a better phrase.
Phew, that's good because I just invested everything in my house on it again. All right, brilliant, David. Speak to you.
Righto. Yeah,
Take
take
care.
care.
Yeah,
Thanks.
bye.